Alright, welcome back guys to FreeCodeCamp, and we're learning recursion by building a decimal to binary converter. And this is part of the JavaScript algorithms and data structures. We're on step 20. Now it's saying in our decimal to binary function, which is on line 5, we're going to convert the number 118 into a binary with leading zeros and return it as a string. So what we're gonna do is inside our decimal to binary function, convert the number 118 into binary with leading 0 and return it as a string. So we could see how we will do that. So we will have it to 0 1 1 1 0 1 1 0. Now we're going to remove the return for step 21. We're going to remove the return statement from the decimal to binary function, which is on line 5 through 6 or 7. So we'll return the remove. We're going to remove the return. And also the quotation marks. And we're going to declare the variable named inputs, quotants, and remainders. So const, or even we could do let inputs and assign it an empty array for each of them. So we're going to assign it equals to an empty array just like this, and then let quotants, quotient, I think, equal to empty array, and also remainders equal to an empty array just like this. Oh, forgot let. And the reason I'm using let is because it could be reassigned. I should even use const because it's equal to an array. And const, it's not reassignable. So now step 22, it says set input equal to the number 0 for now. So we could do input equal to 0. So now step 23, it says for decimal to binary converter, you'll need to divide input by 2 until the quotient or the result of the dividing two numbers is 0. But since you don't know how many times you will have to divide input by 2, you could use a while loop to run the block of code as long as the input is greater than 0 and then can be divided. So this is how we use a while loop, and this will keep running. The while loop will keep running if I is less than 5. So we're going to create a while loop that runs as long as the input is greater than 0. I'll leave the body of the loop empty for now. So we could do while, and then our parentheses, inside our parentheses we're going to do input is greater than 0 and curly braces for the body. And this is inside our decimal to binary, and the input will come from the argument over here, the prop. So now step 24, the tricky part of while loops is that if you're not careful, they could run forever. It's called an infinite loop and cause your browser to crash. So to avoid the while loop or the infinite loop, we'll need to make sure the condition for the while loop eventually becomes false. In this case, we want to make sure the input variable eventually becomes 0. So move the input equal to 0 statement into the body of the while loop. And this will make it so it only runs once, one at a time. So we're going to move this input equal to 0 inside our while loop, just like this, inside the body of the while loop. So now step 25, it says to divide numbers in JavaScript, we'll need to use the division operator, which is a slash. For example, const quotient 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So inside our while loop, we're going to create a variable named quotient and assign it a value of input divided by 2. So right now we're inside our while loop, and on line 11, we are going to write let quotient. I'm using let because it's reassignable and the value will always change for the quotient. So let quotient equal to input divided by 2, just like this. And also add spaces to make it easier to read. So now step 26, like we saw in the last step, division can lead to a floating point number with a decimal point. So the best way to handle this is to round down to the nearest whole number. So we could use a method called math.floor, which will round down the quotient of the input divided by 2 before it is signed. So we could just remove this after the assignment, and we could do math.floor method, and inside this we could do input divided by 2, and I'll add spaces to make it easier to read. So now this will round down the input or the quotient value. So now step 27, it says now that we have the operation with the lower, now we have an operation that will lower the value of the input each time the loop runs. We don't need to worry about the loop running forever. So we're going to update the last line of the while loop and assign the quotient to the input. So now this is still inside our while loop. So instead of the input equal to 0, we could do quotient is equal to input. And this will make sure it should actually be the other way around. Input equal to quotient. And this will just be a check. So this will tell us if the input is still greater than 0 or less. So next for our step 28, it says we need to calculate the remainder of the input divided by 2. We could do this by the remainder operator, which is a percent sign, which returns the remainder of the division of two numbers. So for example, constant remainder 5 or remainder 2 will be 1. In other words, the dividend 5 can be divided by the divisor 2 multiple times. Then you are left with the remainder of 1. So 2 could go into 5 2 times, and the remainder is going to be 1 since it can't go more. So inside the while loop, we're going to create a variable named remainder. So we can do const remainder is equal, and use the remainder operator to assign it to the remainder of the input divided by the value, or divided by 2. So const remainder is going to be input divided by 2. It shouldn't be divided, it should be module or the percent sign. Now step 29, it says inside the while loop, we're going to use the push method to append input to the inputs array. This will help us get a better idea of how the conversions work later when you use the log the contents of the array. So we could do input dot push or input dot push into inputs array. Oh, it should be the other way around. So it should be inputs dot push input into the inputs array, just like this. So you can watch my next video for step 30.